Okay. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jay Bykowski from the Finance Committee, and I originally from Boston, and we say in Boston, Happy St. Patty's Day to everybody.
Yay.
Drive carefully when you go home, and welcome, and we thank you. We thank you for being here on this kind of miserable weather day. This is a joint meeting of the Selectboard and the Finance Committee. We do have one piece of Finance Committee business to address, and that is approval of the minutes of February 28, the most recent minutes. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? There being none, may I have a vote, please? Steve?
Steve Schatz, aye.
Pam Boudreau, aye.
Jim?
Lopez, yes. Do we have to say our name?
Yeah. Because of that,
Joe vote.
and Jay Bykowski, okay?
You can use this one if you
So 5-0, minutes approved. Okay, the purpose for this joint meeting this evening is to talk about some of the budget items that have been previously discussed at past meetings, and basically we have three departments that are going to present their requests tonight. The first would be the police department. Is that okay, Michael? And next would be highway, and next would be the fire department. So without further ado, I'd like to call on Chief Fennelly to present his request to this joint committee.
You want me to sit at the table or up here?
Anything you feel comfortable doing.
I don't mind standing here.
Okay.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me here. So, police department this year, for the first time since 2014, is requesting an additional officer. In my 6 years as the chief, I haven't been before you, this committee, asking for anything other than police cruisers, which is, operating equipment. But so this is my first ask of anything significant that would increase the budget significantly in the police department. So this is really driven by the police reform that went into effect last July 1st. And I sent I sent a memo to the select board and Michael, and I think everybody has it.
Everybody has it.
You kind of get the gist of what happened during this. The whole kerfuffle with reserve police officers didn't hit us until right around July 1st, when everybody, realized that, oh boy, the MPTC is going to do away with reserve officers. So, so here we are. Stockbridge PD runs with 6 full-time officers, and we had allotted usually 3 or 4 reserves. Those reserves would cover a lot of overtime shifts. Whenever it wasn't covered by the full-time officers, which was frequent, the reserve officers always stepped up and they covered those shifts. We don't have that anymore. We are down to 0 reserve officers. The Reserve Academy is non-existent anymore. They did away with it, so there's no feeder system for police departments anymore. This has had a very big impact on small departments like ours, even bigger impacts on smaller departments like Otis or Hinsdale. Places like that are getting it even worse. So I understand it's never a good time to come and ask for a significant amount of money, especially now with inflation. I wish we were having this meeting 4 months ago, 5 months ago, but now with inflation and gas prices going up, I can understand there being a reservation. Hopefully that's going away soon. And things will go back to normal. I don't know when, but hopefully soon. But this reform law was put into place basically as unfunded mandates. So the state has put the burden on municipalities to fund the extra training for these so-called bridge academies. The problem with these bridge academies is once the officers are trained, they are considered full-time officers. If you have a reserve officer in your department that completes that bridge academy, guess where they're going? Wherever they can find their first full-time job. So the ability to retain any of those bridge trained full-time certified officers to stay in your department as a reserve, non-existent, not going to happen. So that creates a dilemma for us as far as the officers' health and well-being. So with 6 officers, we run 4 every day. Throughout the course of a day, there's 4 officers on. Between the midnight shift, evening shift, the day shift, and the flex shift. So there's 4 officers that have already worked a shift. Somebody is out, somebody's on vacation, somebody has to cover that shift. So now you have 2 people that are on days off. Are they going to come and cover it? Maybe, maybe not. And the other 4 have already worked a shift that day. So do they want to work 16 hours in a day? So it really affects our ability to cover these shifts.
Can I just clarify one point? I missed something. We said, Darrell, that we have 6 officers and 1 reserve. Does that include the chief's position or plus the chief?
No, that doesn't include me. We have 6.
I wanted to be sure of that.
And 1 reserve in that memo.
Right.
Since that memo was written, one of our full-time officers left and went back to where they came from after 3 months, which is what I'll get to next. Now that position is being filled with our reserve officer, Officer Messina,
Right.
who was full-time over in West Stockbridge, also worked as a reserve for us. We've promoted him up into that full-time position here. So our reserve officer is gone.
So it's only 6 full-time.
So we have 6 full-time now, and that's it.
And did the budget for the reserve folks get rolled into the budget for the full-time person?
So the budget for the reserve officers, there wasn't a set budget for it because the reserve officers are covered by the overtime line. So we actually saved a lot of money every time these reserve officers worked because they were paid a significantly less pay rate than the full-time officers, and it wasn't at a time and a half rate. So what we've experienced and what I've experienced, and I'm sure some of you maybe have read articles, is this younger generation of workers, employees, whatever you want to call them, anybody under 40 years old. I'm not saying all of them, I'm not going to generalize, but we've experienced that the work ethic that we all have at our ages is not there with people under 40 years old. When I came to this town, I wanted to work. The reason I came here was because there was a better pay rate and a better working environment, I thought, which was true. But I wanted to work as much as I could to make more money to provide for my family, to buy a nicer house and, provide for my children and whatnot. This generation doesn't seem to have the same priorities. Their focus is to enjoy themselves and have time off and do whatever pleases them. Loyalty to a department is not there anymore. So when they feel that they are not satisfied here, off they go. We just had a guy we hired, he lasted 3 months. Wanted to go back to where he came from because he was more comfortable there. at a $20,000 pay cut. So it's difficult in this environment for police to recruit and to retain officers. So, which brings me back to our overtime problems that I think that we are going to experience going forward. Officers, well, for example, we've never had forced overtime in our department up until a month ago. So we experienced it once last month and we experienced it on Wednesday. So when that starts happening, again, as I wrote in that memo, that it's a slippery slope and it snowballs. You end up with low morale, people start leaving. And if you get that reputation that people are going to leave your department and you shouldn't work there because you won't be able to take your time off as you want, we're not going to be able to recruit anybody. And right now we are one of the more desirable departments in Berkshire County. So, with that said, the other parts of this request has to do with moving our department forward and providing a level of service that I think our town deserves. We have the plan, if this were approved, would be to take our current sergeant out of the scheduled rotation, put him on a more or less administrative, flexible administrative schedule, and have him be the investigator for the department. Right now, every officer is their own investigator, which is hard. What that does is, for example, we caught a case last year, a breaking and entering case, where they stole a bunch of garden equipment and whatnot. Got called into our station at 7 a.m. Our midnight guy went and took the report. He owns that report. That's his report now. That's his case. Unfortunately, it's hard to investigate a case on the midnight shift. You know, somebody has to make the calls. Somebody has to follow up with witnesses, gather statements, make phone calls, other agencies, if it happens to spread out of state or multi-jurisdictional. So what our plan is to create that investigator position who can handle these larger investigations. For example, another example would be that case that we recently had with the that shoplifting ring that we caught here about a month or two ago. So that was the sergeant who ended up with that. He caught these guys. Now, this wasn't just a minor crime of one-time shoplifting. These guys left our area once they were let loose and went straight away committed more crimes. They've been doing it all over the Northeast to the tune of about $1 million, to the point where Homeland Security is now calling our sergeant, asking for information and wanting to work with him. And he is now identifying these people as they catch them. So, but with that investigation, a simple stop that turned into something much larger. During that investigation, he put in 113.5 hours on shift to investigate and follow up on that. He put in 20 hours of overtime. The monetary terms of that entire incident cost our town $4,450 in straight pay, $1,176 in overtime, for a total of $5,626.
But that would also take him off of doing his regular duties.
Well, that's the other part of it.
So-
Not only does it cost us overtime whenever somebody catches a case like that and they have to come in on their off time to follow up and do what they need to do, it also, like Chuck just said, takes them away from the patrol time that people deserve in this town. We get calls for radar all over the place. Every time you're stuck pushing paper on a report or trying to investigate and follow up, that's time taken away from our proactive policing out in the street. Another big one we had recently, within the last couple of years, was that burglary down at the convenience store. Where they, I mean, this case was nothing compared to the man hours we put in on that. As it ended up, they caught him in New York State. So now we have to work with New York State Police, the District Attorney's Office, the State Police crime unit to try to gather our evidence for our case that was found over there. So, and this is all being done by the day shift guy, you know, as he's trying to go out and field calls during the day too. So, so that's a big part of this. I don't take this lightly, asking for this. This is not something that I'm just like, oh, they should just give us the money and do this. That is not how I feel at all. It is, but I do feel it's critical to our department. The first part of it, being able to cover and being able to give these guys a quality workplace where they want to stay, where they're not going to be burned out and end up making mistakes out on the street. Everybody now, because of that police reform law, is walking on eggshells. One mistake, now you're decertified and you're gone. With fatigue factored into that, that makes it all the more, I don't want to say probable, but it just, I mean, it makes it easier for it to happen, unfortunately. Anytime you're fatigued, and our shifts here are 16 hours, it's paid if you're taking overtime, you know, and you're on shift. Working a bunch of those, I can tell you, it's tiring. You know, you think driving around in a car all day, it can't be that bad, but mentally it is, and it's a drain. And these guys, you know, they work 24/7 every day of the year. There's no breaks for us. We don't get a week where we can all go away and do what we want. So when these guys want their time off, I don't want to see them not get it because others won't sign up for their shift. Adding one person to this is not going to solve that completely, but it's another person to ease that burden at this point. And to be able to turn a person into an investigator, I think will just help us out immensely. It'll save money on the overtime, and it will certainly increase the quality of our work here at our PD. So Lee and Lennox have already moved in that direction. They've already created investigator positions within their departments. They've already started expanding. Last year, both departments expanded. Lennox is expanding, going to attempt to expand again this year by one person. And I know it's, I mean, is it apples to oranges? I don't know. Yeah, they may be bigger in population. As far as the amount of people that are in our towns at any one point, and the amount of our call volume, I would say is pretty close to theirs. And a lot of days, probably more. You know, at any one time in the summer with a popular artist concert at Tanglewood or Tanglewood on Parade, we have a lot more people in our town than Lee or Lennox, or maybe even Great Barrington for that matter. I know everybody wants to look at us as small potatoes, but we're not. We have a lot of activity here. We have a lot of people here in season, you know. Since COVID happened, we don't really have an off season. When I started here, our busy time was Memorial Day through Christmas, and then it would die out. Once COVID hit, that changed. We have not slowed down in 2 years because everybody moved here. So I don't know if anybody's tracked the numbers on that, or if we know how many of the second homeowners came here. I don't know, but our call volume is pretty consistent now. You know, even in the off months. So that's it. Does anybody have any questions or?
Chief, would you share for us the relationship, I think you had put into the budget somewhere around 118,000 for this particular position.
Yeah.
Now, basically, we do have overtime costs relative to the existing staff for time off. How will this position affect the overtime that we presently spend?
Okay. So, yeah, good question, because Mike brought this up today and said, we were talking about how the investigator's position is going to work. And so this 118,000 figure is probably going to be less because I didn't take into account that the investigator will be out of the regular scheduled rotation. They will be working an administrative type flexible schedule as needed where the investigation's taken. If it happens to be that he has to work on a Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then that's what he's going to work. It'll be very flexible. So what won't happen with his 3 weeks of vacation is they won't need to be covered. So all that overtime that I had budgeted in that 18,000 for him shouldn't be there. Oh, I'm sorry, Mike?
So I threw up on the screen for everybody after talking to the chief. If we were looking at not filling a position, the budget would go up $12,000. Because after discussing with the chief how the position would be used and it wouldn't be creating, the budget, if you were to add the position, would go up 101,000. So if you minus the 12 that was already built in, then you end up with roughly an $89,000 increase instead of the 118. So it did lower some of the cost by removing that from a position that would be creating overtime.
But if we've been staffing the time off with reservists, where are you going to get the manpower to staff now? Because it's kind of the same size department if you're moving one to the investigator.
This is what I'm asking for, is another full-time person that would go in. We would remove the sergeant from the rotation. The new person would go into that rotation. So it would stay as it is right now.
But didn't we have it 6 plus the reservists?
We did.
And now we're going to have 6 without any reservists.
Correct.
And I'm just wondering how
Well,
we're
we'll
going to
have 7.
fill the positions.
We'll have 7.
No, but one of them is
One
the investigator.
administrative.
Right,
Well, that
but
would-
he will still be available.
that would
to
do
cover
is-
overtime
Oh,
shifts.
okay.
What that would do is, like, that person who made an arrest has to stay overtime.
Yes.
4 or 5 hours, where
Yep.
that person go home and the investigator will come in the morning, take it
Eliminates
over.
overtime pay,
One sec, Jim.
But we're still
but not completely.
Yes,
not,
Yes.
we should be a manpower, so
Yeah.
down the road, I could see hiring actually another officer.
that,
Right.
like I truly feel we've operated here since before I came here on a shoestring staff with the help of reserves. Without those reserves, now we're really walking a tightrope, because if somebody goes out injured on duty or quits and we can't fill that spot, now we're down another. And that is, it's really a tightrope we're walking. Now, Chuck, to get back to your point that you just made, today was a perfect example. So our midnight officer caught a restraining order violation at 7:30 this morning. Okay, he's supposed to be off at 8. So now he's stuck with that for another 3 or 4 hours, trying to call Pittsfield, where it originated from, and follow-up calls and getting a statement from the victim. So, and writing the report so we can get it into court this morning to get the arrest warrant for the violation. So now he has 4 hours of overtime. If we have that investigator's position, he comes in, he takes it over. That officer this morning takes the original call, the original need for service at the house. He leaves the house, turns it over to the investigator. He now follows up and chases all those leads at no overtime.
So, you can go.
Go ahead,
Has
Jim.
the number of investigations over the last year increased substantially from what I heard you say?
I wouldn't say over the last year, but over the last few years, and I don't have any stats in front of me about it, but
Well, your overtime figures seem to indicate that that's part of the problem.
yeah. We are seeing a huge uptick in fraud stuff, telephone fraud, mail fraud, computer fraud, that type of stuff. 5-6 years ago, I mean, I don't want to say it was non-existent. We didn't get it much. Now we're getting it. We get calls a couple times a week about this stuff that somebody, well, we had one last week. Somebody got a call and said, you have to go and for whatever reason, you need to go and buy gift cards. And they did.
Yeah.
Read the numbers off the back and, we got to try to chase that down. That scam call into the school board meeting there a few months back, or that vulgar call. We tried chasing that down too. These are man hours that goes into this stuff, and sometimes you're just chasing your tail with this computer stuff. But in years past, larger investigations, we could call the state police and say, this is what we have, and more or less, they would always come out without hesitation. Now they're so busy as well that a lot of times you're on your own, not to any fault of their own. It's just that they're overwhelmed as well. So.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Darrell, perhaps you could say a little bit, tell us a little bit about how you're handling both domestic abuse and mental health issues and the kind of pressures. And this is not a setup question for you, but I am curious as to what kind of demands that's putting on the department.
So mental health here in Stockbridge seems to be more frequent than most places, I would say. And I don't know if it's, the reason for it. It just seems like we have more than most.
It confirms everything that every one of us knows.
You've clearly been watching our Zoom meetings.
So
Is that part of your training or is that
Yes.
additional training?
it is. So we get yearly training on mental health issues. Domestic violence is something that is it very frequent in this town? I would say we're on the lower scale of domestic violence here as opposed to other towns around us. But mental health wise, I think we're on the higher side than most of the other towns around us. The mental health challenges that we face, we are working towards, again, because of the emphasis put on it in the police reform bill. We are working on creating a co-responder position through Tri-Town Health.
Shared service.
Shared services with Lee and Lennox. So we're looking into funding that with grants, hopefully. We're trying to get it up and off the ground before the end of this year. Hopefully we can find some money in there. Lee has money from their pot shop endeavors. So that's
A lot of money.
a lot of money.
Yes.
So
That's why they have lower mental health.
Us and Lennox, we're scratching around, looking under the sofa cushions for some money for this thing. But yeah, that's the direction we're heading to try to alleviate some of our mental health calls.
Chuck?
So the 118,000, is that for the new officer coming in? Is that Kirk, Sergeant Nichols being promoted?
Nope.
Some of that, what is that? Is that
So
takes to put an officer on duty?
luckily we have in our sergeant, a guy who is
Oh, he's a great,
fully
he's
dedicated
perfect for the job. I mean,
to this department. And there is no bump in pay for this. This is extra. Well, it's a reallocation of his duties.
Okay.
You know, is it extra? Yeah, it's probably going to be more work for him. It's not going to cost us anymore. We're not going to pay him more to do this job.
Well, the reason I asked was if it's less, then I would consider another officer.
Yeah, I think he's right.
I think you need, this is a great position, but you're not really resolving your overtime with the 6 officers you have. It is affecting it somewhat, but is it enough to keep your department focused? You got a great department, you got great officers.
Yeah.
And I don't want to lose any of them.
Is it?
And I just want to
have
know.
to cover the
if this is
vacation,
time-
right?
This is the time to,
Well, we don't have to cover Kirk's vacation, but the one thing I wanted to say was that clearly, I think in terms of efficiency, this makes a lot of sense. And we know that Kirk is a great investigator.
Yes, he's
There's
our
no
best.
doubt about that.
Yes.
Bringing in one person, though, you're going from 6 officers in your rotation to 6 officers in your rotation and then
Right.
Kirk here. That will alleviate some overtime.
Some.
It's
However,
enough.
will it completely mitigate it? I don't think so. So I think, yeah, looking forward to maybe adding one more officer, maybe not this year, obviously, but down the road.
Yes.
My biggest concern about the forced overtime is the safety issue.
Yeah. Why not this
Not,
year?
you
Why
know,
not this year?
retention.
Why not this year? I agree with
my
you.
question is,
Well-
why not this year? I mean, if we, finance committee, but,
I'm all for it.
I mean, it's.
Yeah.
We know
The
he'll
one,
look for
the one
that.
department that is vital to, really, I mean, is our police department.
And when you started talking about the one mistake thing that you brought up, I mean, that's really kind of the reason is, you know, vacation, your other officers are going to be completely, you know,
Just
built.
keep in mind one item. It does,
No, I just wanted to-
correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, but it does add 7 people to cover overtime.
That's right.
So it does add a person to cover overtime. Because right now you only have 6 that can cover. Even though Kirk is not, the sergeant wouldn't be creating overtime position, it still now gives the chief 7 people.
But he had 4 reservists covering the vacation time.
No, we have.
No, we have in the past been flex.
Just saying that now people have to.
I'd like to call on Bill Vogt. He's had his hand up.
I didn't mean to change the subject, but where are you going to get this guy?
So it would have to be put out and advertised.
And what's your sense of how easy it will be to find?
I
Do
don't.
you make phone calls and try to recruit from other forces, or?
We have done that. Yes. Well, we will do a proper search. And if that fails, then, word gets around. And like I said, we're a more desirable department than most because people are treated so well here and they make a good rate. But I can tell you, our last officer that we hired, it took a significant amount of time. And we did regular advertising through the Berkshire Eagle and local channels on our Facebook, social media and stuff. We did advertising through the Mass Chiefs, the Western Mass Chiefs. We didn't get much there. And finally, I did on our computer operating system for our police network that's throughout Berkshire County. We put a message in that that went to every officer who turns on a police computer in Berkshire County, and we hooked one through that. So
How long did it take?
that was about a 4-month wait before that person was on duty and going.
Jim?
It seems to me, listening to this discussion is, what really has exacerbated this entire situation is the doing away with the Reserve Academy and not having reserve officers. And I would highly recommend that the Finance Committee recommend to the Selectboard that they make a pretty strong recommendation to the politicians in Boston that they reinstate the Reserve Academy. I think it won't solve the problem today, but it will help solve the problem going forward. And it isn't going to get solved unless you people take a strong stance with Boston. These unfunded mandates, these doing away with these things, all in the in the aura of being nice to people is affecting us having good safety in all of our.
The state was a federal.
And they're hearing that from a lot of towns.
So I want to say that the police reform, some of it was needed, okay? It wasn't, we'd been asking for years for a post commission to try to weed out bad officers. Mass chiefs were asking for that for years and years. So in that respect, parts of that reform law were right up our alley. We were all for it. Unfortunately, I think what happened is I don't know. I don't know how to phrase it in a nice way.
You don't have to, it's not
Don't even say
necessary.
it, so good. We know we.
Yes, you don't have to do that.
The mandates are the mandates. I think we
It
just
is.
got to deal
It
with
is what
what
it
it
is.
is.
Did you have another
No,
point?
no, that's fine.
There's
That's
parts of it,
fine.
they were good, parts of it that didn't work in our favor so
What do you
much.
think the,
Let's try and stick to the budget
what do you think the
issues.
likelihood of the grants are for this, this mental health specialist that you wanted with the shared services?
Good. That is one part of, that came out of this police reform that they are funding and will be funding heavily here in the future, is the mental health aspect of policing.
Like good as in like it's a sure thing, or should we back up funds? I mean,
No, no.
we're talking about trying to put that in place this year.
So we're going to be coming with a request because it actually is one that we think would fit well under the ARPA funds that we have to fund initially the position and then get the position in. And we talked about trying to use as a multiplier, then use it to go after the federal and other funds in order to fund the position long term.
That's for Tri-Town Health.
That's for Tri-Town
Yeah.
Health, and it'll help the three communities. So we have a budget. I'll be bringing it forward with the chief to the select board to use our ARPA funds, to use that to get it off the ground, and then in the future, try to get it grant funded, just like.
What the number is,
Tri-Town.
Michael?
Chief, I remember right, it was 44.
44, yes, right around there. Yep.
Yeah.
I'd like to, if there are any more questions for the chief, can we have them? Because we do have two other department heads that we've got to, that have to talk to us. Anything else for Chief Fennelly?
Can I just throw in one more thing?
Absolutely.
As for this investigator's position, so it's, well, while it's called an investigator position, there's more to it than just those examples that I used in investigations. So in our department now, we, each officer is assigned different tasks. Fleet maintenance is one, medical inventory, cruiser inventory, care for the radar trailers and radar signs. These are all different jobs that they all do. That we could now consolidate into that investigator's position. He would take it all. So these other officers aren't doing this while they're on, should be up shagging calls or proactive patrol.
And just to be clear, so the flexibility of this particular position that you're proposing also would include possibly covering overtime in the event of, say, an injury, illness, et cetera?
Yes, so if we had a long-term injured on duty or somebody left and had to be out for months at a time, that position would revert back to, revert back to 6 people.
Okay,
He'd go back into the regular rotation and we would operate as we are right now.
okay, and it's presumably based on how many investigations are ongoing, but I think we can assume that there's going to be some downtime in
Absolutely.
terms of investigations.
Yes.
Okay,
So if he's not investigating, if he's not doing any of the numerous other duties that will be put on him, he will be out patrolling, running radar and doing regular police stuff. It's not going to be a day off. Oh, you don't have an investigation? Yeah, just take the day off. No way.
I'm sure after your presentation settles in, we'll have some questions for you. But we do thank you for your comprehensive written presentation and your discussion with the joint committee. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks, Chief. Have a good night.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to, at this point, call on Hugh Page do you want to introduce the subject or do you want Hugh to?
We'll let you.
Okay, Hugh, you're on from the Highway Department's request.
Okay, first of all, I know I'm not going to mulch over a lot of where we are. Mr. Chief, he covered that pretty good, you know, where we are today, and how hard it is to get things and people. I know a while ago, we put together a fleet interview and overview, or inventory and overview rather. And working with Mr. Canales, we put a lot of effort into presenting and forging a capital plan. Unfortunately, the way things are going with our repair bills, you know, I know we've exceeded our repair bills. The need to throw that out the window, I think, is kind of here. We need to bring some new equipment in. It seems that we're working very hard to go to work right now. You know, and I can understand the capital plan point and understand that this is not financially the right time to do it. So as being a town resident and looking at it from your point of view, I completely support it. But being one of the guys at 2 in the morning working on our trucks to keep plowing snow, I'm going to bat for my highway. You know, we're looking at bringing in, we're asking for 4 new trucks. We're asking for a sidewalk machine. It's actually a smaller unit. It's more of an articulating unit. I think it's going to bring us in a better price point than bringing in a tractor. It'll be spec to be able to sweep the sidewalks. We'll have a snow blower, fork, and a bucket. And we're going to put a rear end tailgate style salt spreader so we do better calibration on our sidewalks with salt usage. We're also looking at splitting a trailer between 2 other departments. And updating our backhoe. Right now, it seems to be more about being compliant, getting from, you know, work area to work area, you know, being compliant, you know, safety and efficiency, you know. I had a truck breakdown. We sent it over. I sent 2 guys over. I had 6.5 man hours in to send the 2 guys to pick a truck up 40 minutes away because it wouldn't start. So we had to get it back here. We sent 1 truck out, got it back, ran 1 load of stone, it broke down. We had to send it away on a hook. And we're waiting for that. That truck is actually, we got that back, used it to haul 3 loads of stone and left the day of the storm. We got up on Prospect Hill, it broke down, we got it back. That one's done being fixed. So I can't help but think as I fill out the invoices in the billing that every time I fill one out, I think, geez, payment would be a little cheaper than this, you know? So I guess that's kind of where I'm at. You know, I know that, again, this is just the wrong time, unfortunately, to be asking to update our equipment. That's an 08 F550 with 90,000 on it. You know, we put some money in that, quite a bit of money in that and repair bills. And as you can see, it's still, there's some more work to be done to it. You know, that's the 08.
I just want to be sure, before we take questions, of what the request consists of. Are we correct in assuming that we're talking about 2 mid-sized plow vehicles?
Yes.
And also a used backhoe?
Yep.
And also an equipment trailer? And a Ford F-350, that's a pretty good-sized truck. That's a big one.
That's a pickup, yeah.
Yep, and a 150.
Yep.
Right.
And a Bobcat.
Yep. This is the backhoe we're requesting to replace it. That, I really can't let it out of the yard at this point, you know, and it's kind of a staple in the town workforce, you know, that we utilize that a lot. I mean, there's a lot of culverts and washings and beavers and cleaning up, you know, we could use that more efficient than putting a machine on the trailer and tying up 2 guys that way. I don't know, we go back to the TerraStar.
Which one's the Terrace?
It's the big one.
Sideways one or the bigger one?
Yeah, I think so.
This one, right?
Yes, that's a TerraStar. That one we got back. Unfortunately, the lights are on, the 4-wheel drive don't work and the heater's not working, but we're trying to get forge ahead. You know, we just put a bunch of money back into that truck here.
Kick the can down the road too.
You know, I mean, again, you know.
Can't get too done.
It's keeping our lights going, our backup alarms going and, you know, tires on it and just.
I think we're talking about in excess. Go ahead, Michael.
So if you remember last year, we did bring a proposal where we had spaced out when vehicles could come in every 4 years, replace the mid-size one, replace the other one. The problem is that we're running into repairs and the equipment is just not allowing us. We understand that it's not optimal to replace in a 1 or 2 year period a sizable chunk of your fleet. But the problem is, I don't think we can wait 3 or 4 years and replace other pieces. That it's really becoming an issue where we can't get out there and provide the service that we need. So that's why it's being brought forward.
I think the request is fine. I'm wondering about how we finance it. I mean, we're using free cash when free cash is going to become so much more valuable. What did they announce? 7 interest rate hikes this year today? You know, you look down a year or two and some of the borrowing we're going to need, that could be at 6, 8%. Why would we use free cash now when we can borrow so much lower and not preserve it for the borrowing we know is coming in the next year or two?
I think, Patrick, this is part of an aggregate question, how we finance equipment, how we finance building, how we finance significant repairs. You know, do we pay off debt and borrow? Do we use stabilization free cash? I don't think there's not a simple answer to this. We're not going to solve that tonight, but we're going to have to go through all of these requests and determine, you know, what the best approach would be and the most cost efficient approach for the town.
So I think the first thing is identifying if these are capital needs.
Right.
And then as a group, identifying how we're funding it.
Exactly.
And I think it is a worthwhile question to discuss both financing and our free cash and other.
I think it would be also very useful if in any way you can prioritize these items. And also, do we have a picture of this Bobcat for the sidewalks that's being proposed?
I don't know. I don't think I got one. There's our new truck that we just got in. I know I got a lot of hours at home, not hours, a lot of time at home campaigning for it. I know Alice working with him's got a lot of time campaigning for it. And I think we're very fortunate to get that from the end of town meeting is, you know, to have that for the snow season. And so there's a few things that we critique about it, but all in all, it's been a real good truck, but that is what we had to get. And it actually has worked out very well for us. It's built.
Is that a truck that you're going to replicate? You're going to have another one like it?
Yeah, working with Mr. Canales, I know that it's getting hard to find guys with licenses, CDLs and class, class Bs and licenses. So this is actually just under CDL. It's, it's hydraulic brakes, so anybody can jump in as long as you got a car license. And so I think that moving forward to become more, gearing towards that's what's happening, I fear, so I think that.
Jim?
Two-part question. The new truck that you got, that was approved last spring, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And it was ordered when?
I found it. As soon as I got town meeting, I started.
Okay, and so when was it received after that?
It was received in December.
Yeah, okay. So the second part of that question is if this is approved today, what we all know about the supply chain, you may not get that one until a year from now.
12 to 18 months is now running time on.
Thank you. 4 quarters out. This particular truck, I made a lot of phone calls and found it, and this one was being built for a show. So I jumped on it as fast as I could, again, taking what we could get, and it's actually filled in niche very well for us.
The last part of it is, this is another example of kicking the can down the road to where that can just exploded into a barrel.
I tried in the past to get trucks replaced, even the newer ones that we had big issues with, and nothing happened. Now we're paying for it.
Real quick, the other picture was our skid steer. I asked one of the employees to get it ready for tomorrow. I wanted to try to, I know it's a little premature, but I wanted to go down and just kind of hit Main Street real quick with the sweeper, hit along the curves for the weekend a little bit And it turned into a work day, or not a work day, but we had to spend some time working on it to, just to use it.
Not pretty sure. Lennox is out sweeping their streets with their sweeper.
What's that?
Lennox is out sweeping their streets. The
Yeah,
spring's here, so we're good.
Keep the
The sweeper goes out, we know spring's here.
Yeah, well, we can keep it from going down the drains, you know, that's important at this point.
I think Chair Roxanne McCaffrey made a very good point that it would be very helpful to identify, prioritize these capital needs, talk about funding, and also the ordering and receipt time for all of this equipment. And we need to have a document that we can look at.
We'll put that together for your next meeting.
Because there's a lot here, you know, my quick calculation, we're talking 800,000 at least, you know, and I may have misadded, but I'm on the short side, I can assure you.
600,000.
You didn't even talk about a fuel increase yet, Hugh, so.
I know.
Well, that's not capital.
Don't worry about that.
That's
It goes up 5%.
But 607,000 right now in equipment.
There you go.
Assuming that prices are going to hold and we built in some
They're not gonna hold.
modifiers, but where they're going, we.
Add 10%.
You know what they say about assume?
Right.
But that's
Right now.
Breaks an ass.
that particular unit that we got in, the white truck, that's got a 7-year warranty on it, the extended warranty. I believe that's also where we're going. We don't have the ability to talk to this.
You're going to remember that one, aren't you?
We definitely need more information, and we'll be talking to you again, for sure.
Like one last question though, are we gonna put any sort of GPS or tracking or any kind of management tools for these sorts of resources?
Actually, I definitely want to with snow and ice. I think that has to become basically a game, for lack of a better word, because I think that the state's going to start watching how much salt towns are using. I know residents are, you know, so I think that will also help track and monitor where we are, how long we've been there, what we've been doing. So if that can find its way into our new builds, I would support that 100%.
Right, but you're thinking vehicle tracking as
Yeah.
opposed to, yeah.
Yeah.
So I know that's been discussed.
Yeah, not only for tracking, but it's efficiency and it kind of I feel it covers me. Like if I'm in a vehicle, and somebody questions it, well, I can prove where I've been and what I've been doing. So I don't think that those are you know, I don't know, disciplinary things. I think they're more of a self-aware, self-tracking, justification units, you know, so.
And then, you know, this truck's on that route and you use X amount of salt,
Yeah,
you know, if it's either too little, too much, where it's
Exactly.
going. So you have better manageable control of uses of your product.
yeah, I know that we went over that with
Yep.
a previous meeting and, you know, we're all aware of it. We're all trying to look into the future, into these new builds, but, you know,
Michael, did you have another point you wanted to make?
Yeah, one of the things that I will be bringing up as we move along, and I think we're gonna wanna push these discussions as far in April as we can. If we can close out the end of the year, and the budget right now is in great shape, other than we have the finalized Hughes salt budget. Once we know that, we could be looking with a sizable amount left in reserve, because we haven't had many things that have come up. So some of these items might be able to move off of some of these lists and use the reserve. It's already money that was raised. And that could be where we might be able to fund like the F-350 and 150 like now. Like, you know, we have to wait till the last 2 months of the year, but by the middle of April, we can do that analysis of where we're at, and we'll have all of our snow and ice will be closed out. And that's usually the biggest driver, unless there's something that came up really unexpected, but, you know, overall, we're in pretty good shape, you know.
and as far as the 150 real quick, I think utilize that for our trash hauling, the lawnmowers. You know, I don't need to throw weed whackers in the back of a snow fighter to head down through the tonic or something to roll. I mean, I think that per lane mile, you know, that would pay itself off in no time, you know, so the smaller trucks definitely do have their niche, so.
Steve?
Hugh, are you giving any thought to electric vehicles for the smaller trucks?
Actually, we have, I know that, I guess I could say it, I know Mr. Buffoni has talked about, we've talked about that at lunch, you know. maybe utilizing that. You know, we talked about range and four-wheel drive and what towing capacity does it have a hitch. So we definitely have talked about it, you know. So I don't know if it'll fit in highway right now or not. I can't answer that without doing more research. We can definitely, I can do some research on that for our next meeting and maybe present, you know.
Also, as part of this request, we should determine which of these vehicles either come as an electric or hybrid. Okay, so we,
Focus on hybrid.
yeah, hybrid, is less of a punch in the gut, if you will, than electric. Electric, you need a whole series of different infrastructure, which is another problem.
Extremely expensive.
Charge mine.
I think the real punch in the
Good point, Steve.
I would say for your benefit only.
The question about the trailer is a shared.
Yes, it's water, sewer and highway. We're gonna split
Right.
that. I just fixed some deck and built some ramp. I had to put 2 tires on it, anticipating it's probably not gonna be till the end of the year before we see a new trailer if we get it. And, again, it's about being compliant and we just wanna go out and work, you know, and we're starting to get rolling pretty good and we just wanna focus on that. You know, we spend an awful lot of time working to go to work on our equipment, so we're just trying to.
We'll definitely be back in touch. Anybody have anything else? We do need a lot more information right now. Okay, Hugh, thank you very much. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to call on Fire Chief Garofoli for his presentation. And his presentation has been, his materials have been circulated to the Finance Committee, I'm sure the Select Board also. So, Chief?
Good evening. I just wanted to start out by apologizing for a discrepancy that existed in my original paperwork that went out to everybody. Unfortunately, I did the paperwork this year a little differently than most. Usually I generate my explanation letter first and then my capital request second and have all my numbers on a separate sheet of paper before I make that. This year I did it backwards and didn't go back to it. And I apologize for that. I didn't realize that I didn't take wording out of my letter and put it in my capital request. That's why the capital request and the letter did not match in their wording. I apologize for that. What I did to make that right was I had a mechanic evaluate the frame on engine 2 so that we had an accurate description of exactly what we were looking at, so that even though that discrepancy was on paper, you could see that it was corrected in the real world. Now the capital request form and the letter you have in front of you now match. When you look at the paperwork, when you look at the wording, they're consistent across the board. There is no discrepancy. With that being said, I know that sometimes paperwork gets handed to you guys. You got full-time jobs, you got other things going on in your life. Has everyone had a chance to review both of those forms? And if not, let me know and I'll go over those with you now. Okay, well, with that being said, I guess the overall budget here hasn't really changed all that much in terms of the operating budget, with the exception of the added fuel costs that Administrator Canales has put in. He was trying to take it upon himself to make sure that our budgets reflected what the current changes were after we submitted our paperwork. So you'll see the fuel line item and the gas and diesel line items have been altered from my original paperwork by Administrator Canales to show the cost projection.
I'll be putting those up when we get discussing afterwards. If you remember this committee, we agreed at our last meeting to increase all fuel, diesel, gas by 50%. So it was done across the board.
I just wanted to address that with you guys ahead of time so you all knew where those numbers came from that were different from the original paperwork. With that being said, there really isn't any significant changes we're requesting there. Obviously, the part where we're running into is you've got a lot of projects in town and you have to address how those projects are going to prioritize across all the town, not just one department. So we come to our biggest expenditure that's been on the table that I've seen tonight, and the biggest expenditure for the fire department, which is the replacement of engine company number 2, which is our frontline piece running out of Central Fire Station. I understand you guys have had questions, concerns. I fielded a round of questions that I did answer and send back to you. I apologize I didn't have fancy letterhead. I was just more making sure I got you the answers you needed in a few days to review it. So do you have any questions on what I sent to you guys in terms of that? That was the breakdown. There was a whole list of questions that the Finance Committee produced
Right.
through Administrator Canales that I got back out to you guys.
Well, I think we ought to have some public discussion about this. I don't think it
Yeah.
should, stop at that. And it would be helpful, if I may, Jay.
Sure.
To ask you, Chief, to go through the questions because.
I don't have them sitting in front of me. I just have the paper I wrote you, that's all.
Well, I'm happy to provide you with a copy. There you go. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. So unfortunately,
Let me just preface, my comments here. These are questions that essentially we had presented last year.
yeah,
And they're all by way of trying to get to an understanding of how the fire department operates, whether or not the equipment that it has can be operated, who is in fact, what kind of calls, what kind of equipment is needed in order to address, the call frequency and the nature of the calls, things of that sort. And that's the purpose of all of this. And when you see one editorial comment, I will just tell you that the $960,000 request to replace, engine number 2, which we knew was coming, although I must say the amount of money was a bit of a surprise to all of us. I know, I appreciate that. I know that. Just makes the answer to these questions that much more important. And given what we're facing, I think we all know that before much longer, we're going to be facing major capital expenditure for school.
yeah, I heard about that.
That's going to come.
It doesn't sound like there's a choice in that matter.
Well, whether there's a choice or not, I mean, that's not the issue so much as at the moment as that there is an anticipated expense there that is going to be rather significant. And I think that $960,000 for a vehicle has to be looked at very closely. So I'd like to go through the questions with you and ask you if you could just give a short response. And quite frankly, I missed the written response.
So
Was there a written response to these questions?
that's what's summarized in this.
I'm sorry, and I didn't
circulated to you.
I didn't get it.
Document.
I did not get it.
So I don't mean to be rude, but
apologize.
that's why I was kind of surprised when you handed me the list. 'cause
No,
I
I'm sorry, Ben. I just, I missed it.
Well, do you mind if I read it out loud then?
Not at all. Go right ahead.
Okay. For those of you.
I'd like the question posed and then you can.
It's not formulated in that fashion. I'm sorry. I did a complete summary document that addresses them all, but I don't have them line by line, question by question. If that
Okay.
makes sense.
So, well, go ahead.
All right. Stockbridge Fire Department is comprised of 20 active members, of which 7 are officers and 8 are EMTs, with 7 being basic level and the fire chief being advanced level. The fire chief is the only full-time employee of the fire department, and the other members and officers are volunteers with varying hours of availability based on their current full-time employment and familial commitments. Normal daytime work hours, Monday through Friday, see the biggest decrease in member availability of 50% or more, and this is the case for all volunteer and call volunteer fire departments throughout the country. Stockbridge Fire Department operates 2 pumpers, a 2001 Pierce Dash and a 1995 Pierce Arrow, 1 pumper tanker, the 2018 KME, which currently has 2,569 miles on it, 1 heavy rescue, the 2013 KME, 1 2016 Ford Explorer used as car 1, 1 Polaris Ranger utility vehicle, UTV, 1 Honda ATV, 1 rescue boat, an 18-foot Zodiac inflatable, one repurposed 2008 F-350 donated from the water department, outfitted with a utility body, and one 20-foot enclosed trailer that will house the UTV and ATV. The 2001 Pierce Dash has reached the end of its useful life due to corrosion-related issues and costly repairs, but is still currently being used as our frontline response pumper as long as it remains in mechanical working order. The 1995 Pierce Arrow is reaching the end of its useful life due to its decreased value and drastically increased repair costs purely because parts are so hard to come by for any needed repairs that are not typical wear items. As long as the repairs remain minor, the 1995 Pierce Arrow will continue to serve our needs for the next few years. The 2013 Heavy Rescue will continue to remain in service for 10 years or more. The 2018 Pumper Tanker will remain in service for 15 years or more. The 2016 Ford Explorer can expect another 2 years of useful service life, at which time reevaluation will be needed. It's anticipated it will last longer than 2 years, but 2 years would be the point at which we would reevaluate it based upon mileage and mechanical needs. The boat, UTV, and ATV shall continue to have a useful life for the next 5 years, at which time reevaluation of those items will be needed. The 2008 F-350 shall continue to have a useful service life of 5 years or more. That one we don't have a lot of miles on. We got it from the water department with high mileage, but we don't put a whole lot of miles on it a year. That's why I'm anticipating that going that many more years. We put a lot of money into it when we got it from the water department, and so it was all the wear items, brakes, calipers, rotors, all the stuff that you would expect. The enclosed trailer will have a useful service life of at least 10 years or more. And besides major repairs or anything that would be a catastrophic failure of any of these at any point in time, we'd have to address those on a case-by-case basis because we're not going to know what that looks like until it happens. So it would be based upon what the cost of the vehicle is, what the cost of the repairs are, and what we're going to gain for the repairs. Is it a temporary fix? Is it a permanent fix? It would be something we'd have to address down the road. This is no different than any other department and any other equipment within the town. You can't predict the future. The Stockbridge Fire Department has 3 stations consisting of Central Station at 1 East Street, Glendale Station at 19 Glendale Road, and Interlaken Station at 11 Interlaken Road. Central Station houses the 2013 Heavy Rescue, the 2018 Pumper Tanker, and a 2001 Pierce Dash Pumper. Glendale Station houses the 2008 F-350, the 18-foot Zodiac boat, and soon will store outside the enclosed trailer containing the UTV and ATV. Interlaken Station houses the 1995 Pierce Arrow and the antique Rio parade piece. The operational need for all 3 stations remains as long as the fire department maintains its current complement of apparatus and equipment. Caveat to that, obviously, if it was a temporary situation, we had a mechanical failure, we had something happen, and we're waiting on a piece to replace a piece, we're not going to worry about what's going to happen with one station. If we were not to replace a piece and take it completely out of service, then we would have to reevaluate what the needs of the station would look like. That's what I meant by the phrase, as long as its current complement of apparatus and equipment is maintained. The last paragraph, in the year 2021, the Stockbridge Fire Department responded to 515 calls for service, comprised of 261 EMS calls and 254 fire calls. Of the fire calls, 10 were active fires, with 7 of them being mutual aid response we provided neighboring towns, 1 being a small grass fire on a residential property, 1 being a chimney fire contained to the chimney, and the last being the major fire at Camp Mackinac. There was 1 question in relation to the stations that I did not have an answer for you, and I apologize. Partly it's my fault, partly it's just the way that the bills are configured for the utilities for the stations. In order for me to be able to accurately tell you what each station's operating budget looks like as a station itself, I need access to the telephone, cable, and electrical utility bills, which are handled under a different account that I don't access or pay the bills to. I can get those for you if you do really need them.
Sure.
But as it stands right now, I can keep track of fuel. And once I have those other utility bills, I can put together a profile of what each station costs per year for you for the last 2 years at least.
Question for you, Chief. You made a point, you had talked about the mileage of one of the vehicles at 2,500 miles.
The reason why that mileage is in there was because it was a question that was posed again.
This is 2018, is that
Yes,
correct?
that's why I put the mileage in for that particular piece.
Is there any sense or practicality with respect to that 2018 vehicle with low mileage to use that as a primary vehicle and perhaps replace one of the others with a different type of vehicle? In other words, that would reduce the cost of acquisition. I don't know. I mean,
So
what do you think about that?
that's actually a twofold question. I can answer how I personally feel
Sure.
based upon my experience and needs as to what I think about doing that. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of it. And there's a lot of shortcomings to that. I understand that the way it is currently and with the mechanical issues that Engine 2 has faced, that this is a concern. So temporarily, do I see the need to switch what is a frontline piece and what is not? It's very much dependent on what this finance committee is going to be looking at moving forward. Because it depends on what money I put in where. Because the other problem is the 2018 pumper tanker, which I'll read you about here. I actually wrote a document on that as well. So we're not denying that there's a need for repair and replacement of engine 2. We've established that. We've unfortunately, for lack of better terms, kind of beat it to death. It's obvious. It's apparent. It's not going to be able to continue as a frontline piece for a long time coming.
But the replacement of it with a similar vehicle is not obvious.
No. So the question as to whether or not engine 5 is a suitable replacement for engine 2 is not a simple yes, no answer. A dual function apparatus such as engine 5, being a pumper tanker, has elements of both uses built into its design, but also lacks several items that make it more suitable as one or the other. Engine 5 is able to function as a fire attack pumper, but it can't do so without significant shortcomings as compared to a normal tanker designed a normal pumper designed specifically for that use. The limitations of engine 5 to function primarily as a fire attack pumper are its general use of operation because it's longer, taller, wider, more top heavy, and less ground clearance, and it has a much larger turning radius than our current engine 2. The second is the pump capacity is decreased by 500 gallons per minute. The third is the hose carrying capacity is decreased by almost half on all sizes of hose. The fourth, there is no foam induction system for flammable liquid involved fires such as car fires. And 5, there is less compartment space used for carrying the needed equipment to accommodate for the larger water tank size and portable pond mounted on the driver's side of the piece. So when you design these dual function pieces, you have to pick and choose what elements you're going to keep of each, because you're taking essentially 2 separate vehicles and combining them into one.
Let me twist this a little bit, and I may be off base here. But basically, a lot of the heavy response things that we do have mutual aid from Lennox and Lee. And the question that I would have is what kinds of equipment do they bring to the table that would supplement, what we would have as a frontline vehicle, and how frequently would that be the case?
So that's not a simple answer either. So this is another question that has multifacets to it, but I will address it to the best of my capability.
I never asked a simple question on my
So basically, for lack of better terms, the dispatch center has a list of what every department has.
Right.
So when a chief or an officer acting as the chief or whoever's in charge signs on and says, I need 4 tankers. Get them for me from South County. They look at the board and go, okay, Egremant's got 2, Sheffield's got 1, Monterey's got 1. There's your 4 tankers. So it's basically whatever the chief or the acting officer requests for your needed apparatus. They usually try to spread out your requests over your neighboring towns, and then anything that would completely deplete a whole centralized area, they'll start pulling from farther away and backfilling stations accordingly. So the answer to your question is we can basically request whatever we need. The problem with pulling in from out of town all the time is you're adding travel time, you're adding response time, because with the exception of one crew in Lee, Lenox, and Great Barrington, those are your only paid crews in our area south of Pittsfield. So you're only, if they're not busy, going to get that crew right away. The rest of those departments are comprised of volunteers. So you're going to run into the same problems you run into here when you set the tones off. Your volunteers have to muster, get to the station, get the apparatus, get it on the road, get to your scene. So ideally, your focus is on utilizing your own municipality and your own equipment to start at least your fire attack and knock down and mitigate your fires. Then you pull in from your mutual aids, but you hope that your first responding pieces are what's going to be able to handle what you have in front of you. So when you get on the scene as an officer, you sign on, you get on the scene, you address what you have, you listen to what's going on in dispatch, and you request mutual aid for what you believe you're going to need to mitigate that scene. But you hope, and your ideal, is to start at least attacking whatever you have in front of you with your own apparatus, because it's the quickest and most efficient way of getting the job done. If you start relying on mutual aid from several miles away to constantly cover you, you're going to see that reflected in how things are addressed.
Question, Chair, Roxanne?
I have a couple of questions. Number one, you gave, I can't remember what it was, but the mileage for engine 5.
Yes.
Okay, and that was 2,000 plus.
Yes.
What is the odometer reading on engine 1 and engine 2?
I don't have that sitting in front of me. The only reason I gave the mileage on engine 5 was it was specifically asked of Michael as opposed as a question.
Maybe Michael didn't pass it on, but I asked him to get the mileage on all 3. My other question, though, is about the calls. So we've got 515 total calls,
Yep.
261 EMS, and 254 fire. Of the 254 fire, how many of those are structure fires?
I actually detailed that out in the last paragraph
Okay,
where I stated that,
is that what you were referring to when you talked about 10 active?
yes, 10 active fires, 7 of those were mutual aid responses we provided other towns. 1 was a small grass fire on a residential
Yeah,
property. And 1 was a chimney fire confined to the chimney. And then the last one was the major fire at Calumet.
So then how do you characterize the other 244?
I characterize those, they're in the town report, which I also have in front of me, what I submitted for the town report this year, so I can read that off to you. But it's basically divvied up in the National Fire Incident Reporting System. There's classifications 1 through 900, in which it details everything out that way.
Why are they called fire calls?
Because they're ones that are only fire department response. They're not medical calls. They're not treating a patient. They're everything else that isn't medical.
Like,
Fire alarm activations.
yeah, dead battery and a smoke detector?
Yep, those would be a fire alarm activation, or depending on, it would be a problem with a smoke detector, depending on how it's dispatched or how it came in.
So the big question then is, okay, you have a lot of these calls. However, how many of those are actually motor vehicle related calls?
Motor vehicle accident calls?
Yeah.
Okay. So motor vehicle accidents with injuries in the year 2021, we had 7. Motor vehicle versus pedestrian accidents, we had 2. Motor vehicle accidents with no injuries. And all that means is that even if an ambulance was initially sent to the call,
Yep,
they were not transported.
okay.
There was 11 of those. So
Okay, what about fire?
Just one sec, Steve.
Car fires. No, I just want to get kind of the breakdown and the idea of what he may need overall.
Yeah.
So in terms of though, you may also be going out on a call for a motor vehicle accident, and that is for suppression of fire.
So yes,
Or fire
that can be an
prevention.
element of it. So that's one of the things. Typically, the response is the rescue will go, and then your engine company will go thereafter. So usually your primary response is Rescue 1, which is our heavy rescue, which has all of our jaws, extrication, cribbing, and
Right.
everything to mitigate the physical components of
Right.
a motor vehicle accident. It also has a 60-gallon compressed air stored calf system, which is compressed air foam system. It's got a 60-gallon tank of
Okay.
pre-mixed foam to initially knock down a small car fire or mitigate a fire should you have that before your other pumper gets there.
Yep. Okay.
The other.
How many of those in a year do you estimate that maybe you actually have to roll a pumper?
I try and bring the pumper on as many as possible because you don't know what you're going to end up with. So the second piece out the door is usually a pumper of some kind, whether it be engine 1 with the second set of jaws or whether it be engine 2 out of the same station, depending on what we have for personnel. I prefer to get it on the road immediately because unfortunately, a lot of the calls that are coming in reporting these accidents are usually cell phone calls. And as we know, with certain carriers in this town, you don't always get a complete call. So you don't always know what you have until you get eyes on it, whether it's the police department or your first responding fire department personnel. So to better be prepared for what we may face, the idea is to get at least 2 pieces on the road as soon as possible.
Okay.
Of the 261 EMS calls.
Yep.
What kind of vehicles do you send out to respond to those?
Typically, unless it's a first responder that's at the station pulling rescue 1, typically it's usually personal operated vehicles, meaning whoever our EMTs are, which were listed in that first paragraph of that document. So you have your 7 basics and myself. So when I'm on duty, I respond in the cruiser, I carry the medical equipment with me. But most of the time, the other EMTs are responding in their personally operated vehicles with their own jump kits that are provided by the department.
So none of the larger vehicles are being sent off?
Not typically, unless we're already in them. Each one of those vehicles has some basic level of emergency medical equipment, and I'm trying to get with the times and outfit every piece of apparatus that we have with its own defib as well, because what they're finding over time is that firefighter deaths are occurring after the calls. So
Do you have just some questions about personnel? And
Yes.
you've alluded to this in your response. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's clear that during the day, from your own response, that you don't have as many volunteers
Correct.
during the daylight hours. So how many officers, for instance, are required to operate engine 2?
there is not a requirement of an officer to operate it. It's only a requirement of whoever is driving the piece or manning the piece to be able to be driving it and be trained on it effectively to be able to run.
So one person is capable of operating that vehicle?
One person is capable of getting it there in terms of driving it there.
Yes.
But in terms of actually operating it and using it.
Yes.
You need one person that is to that piece, that stays with that piece no matter what. So if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 people in that piece.
Just give me some idea as to how many people you need to man that vehicle at a structure fire.
As many as you possibly can to fill every seat on the truck.
What's the minimum?
Okay, how many
Minimum is 2?
seats are there on a truck?
6.
So in order to fully utilize that vehicle, you need 6 people.
In my opinion, yes.
Okay.
You want every seat filled.
That's fine. I appreciate that. During the daylight hours, are you able to get 6 officers to man that vehicle?
No, and nobody
Okay.
is in Berkshire County.
All right, thank you. Now, do you have any paramedics on the
No.
force? None. Is there any effort to recruit paramedics to the force?
This is where I think there's a little bit of an educational gap here in terms of what paramedics would be used for in a pre-hospital setting outside of an ambulance. Unfortunately, in this town, when we don't have an ambulance and you respond as an EMT, you are responding and acting as a first responder because you're not responding with an ambulance. So what that means is we are very limited in what we can do for treatment modalities pre-hospital. So I can't do everything at the advanced level that I could do in the back of an ambulance working for Stockbridge Fire Department. However, when a mutual aid ambulance comes, they can ask me, because I am state licensed and certified, under their direction to do some of the things that I can as an advanced provider.
But you're the only one on the force capable of doing that, is that correct?
I'm the only one at the advanced level, yes. Everybody else is at the
All right, so if you're not available,
Yep.
what does the force do?
They do exactly the same thing that they would do even if I was there. They go to the scene with their jump kit, they initiate care.
Mutual aid,
The transporting ambulance comes in
right.
to pick up the patient. There's an ambulance, so let me go back. When a medical call comes in, 911 is dialed. depending on geographic location in the town of Stockbridge, assuming every ambulance around us is in service, depending on where you are in town, depends on what ambulance service responds to your call. If you're in the Furnace District, you're going to get Southern Berkshire Ambulance. If you're Route 7 South, usually past the Goodrich Street area, you may get Southern Berkshire, you may get Lee. It's whoever the dispatcher is that day. Lee Ambulance covers the geographic center of town, most of the town of Stockbridge. The outskirts towards Hawthorne Street, Hawthorne Road, Interlaken Road are oftentimes covered by Lennox.
Right.
Of all the services around us, every single one is paramedic level now.
I know.
So every single one of them is paramedic level. They're automatically dispatched with 911. If they're out of service, they go down their mutual aid list through EMS to figure out what ambulance is
So
closest.
the answer to the question is that paramedic service is available through mutual aid.
It's automatic aid, yes.
Through mutual aid. That's all I want to know.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
Agreement.
That's okay.
And there are stipulations relative to the training of the paramedics now. They're a certified paramedic, needs specialty training.
Yes.
They're very difficult to hire these people.
Always.
It's multiple years of schooling, clinical ride time, et cetera.
Correct.
I don't know what the total hours are up to nowadays.
So are our EMTs on our fire department, including yourself, members of the Lee Volunteer Ambulance Squad?
No, we are
No
not
longer
members
are.
of an ambulance squad.
Really? Why?
For lack of better terms, there was conflict of interest because we're affiliated with them, because we're paying them to do things.
Right.
If we have these EMTs working for two different agencies, are we showing bias to one versus the other? Should we be on everybody's roster? Should we be on just one person's roster? Because there was a lot of confusion as to what the roles and responsibilities would be. And a lot of these services have gotten away from volunteers. So in order for them to work for these other agencies, they would have to be employees.
Okay, so the answer is they did away with the volunteerism.
Yes, Lennox Ambulance and Lee Ambulance are not staffed by volunteers anymore. They're staffed by paid people pulling actual shifts.
Okay.
I think one of the key issues here is the equipment issue, basically.
Yes.
And, staffing and supplementing with mutual aid, that's another issue. Ambulance, we do have an agreement with Lennox and Lee. But I think we need more information and detail on the equipment, if you will. For example, Chief said that, yes, it's in his mind, a remote possibility to have the 2018 vehicle as a first responding vehicle. But, what do we do with the two Pierce Arrows, pumper 1 and 2, and so forth and so on? I don't feel right now comfortable in my own mind making a judgment. I think we need more information and more detail.
Yeah, Jay, I think the issue is not simply an equipment one. It's an equipment one that is tied to the availability of manpower. It's all well and good to have $1 million piece of equipment, but if you can't operate it properly during times of the day, then it's of absolutely no use. And I think that the manpower issue is directly related to the capital needs issues of this department. And ultimately, it's really a question of whether or not we can continue to afford to have an independent fire department.
Right.
And, and the longer we don't discuss that, the greater disservice we're going to do to this town.
Jim?
If you wouldn't mind, if I could comment on Steve's piece here. I do agree that there are concerns, and this is not a unique situation to the town of Stockbridge. Every volunteer department throughout Berkshire County, and frankly throughout the country, is facing these same type of issues down the road. Do we do like Lee and Lennox and Barrington and start going to a volunteer combination or call volunteer department? Do we look at what it would look like to work with other towns. Unfortunately, this county did itself a disjustice many, many years ago when it went away from a county government system to make, not knowing that 20 years down the road, we'd be looking at what we're looking at in terms of emergency services, highway departments, et cetera, looking at shared services. So it makes things a lot more difficult because in order to blend departments, multi-jurisdictional without the advent of water districts like you have out on the Cape and some of the other places where it's a little different. It's not a geographical border. It's a district with its own governing body. Similar to a county government system, but not quite. We don't have that here. So if we want to blend services with other towns, you have more than one select board you have to deal with. You have more than one budget. You have more than one set of employee rules. You have all these other things that come into play with it. But the future of the department is this. We have a need now. So the answer to your question is this. If we do nothing, absolutely nothing, you have two pieces that will fail eventually and not be usable. So if you have these two pieces that are older, that are either in a state of corrosion or for age purposes only are having a hard time finding parts, when they break, and they will eventually break, you are now left with no apparatus to fill that void. So the question that you're posing is a very valid one of whether you can fill every seat in the cab. Yes, that is an issue. Yes, that is a concern. And frankly, it's been a concern for many, many years as to whether you can fill every piece in every apparatus. And since when I first joined the department back in 1999, it's been a concern ever since. The numbers have gone down over the past 20 years, and they're going to continue to go down. Daryl alluded to
the numbers of what?
Available volunteers.
Oh.
People willing to volunteer, people joining the department, people coming in. It's been a tradition in the fire service throughout the whole country. There's books on it, there's movies on it, you can just look it up. It's all family legacy. You have the same families, the same last names, the same people in all these pieces throughout the counties, throughout the states. So the question that you pose is a very valid one. What does the future look like, and what should we put our money in and what should we not put our money in? And I can tell you this, right now, you have three pieces of apparatus that are used for frontline firefighting purposes in some fashion or another. You have a pumper tanker, and you have two other pumpers that are reaching the end of their useful life. Frankly, they're at it. So even if you decide to do nothing with the other two, take the other two completely out of service, you're going to take a piece of apparatus that was designed as a dual function apparatus that's not truly designed to be a pumper and not truly designed to be just a tanker, and you're going to ask of it to do the work of three pieces, and it's not possible.
What would happen if we bought another one of those?
It'd be the same thing. You'd have literally two of the exact same problem. My personal feeling is if you were to look at anything down the road, your honest option would be to replace one pumper. And then when the other one reaches the end of its life, has total mechanical failure, look at that period of time when that happens. Do we continue to put money into it? Do we retire it? Do we do something different? But either way, you need one frontline pumper. Even if you decided to go mutual aid, even if you decided to go regional, even if you decided to go anything else, you're going to need one frontline attack pumper within your town limits that can respond to your fires as your first line piece.
We have a point over here. Go ahead.
Is engine one operational?
Yes, engine one is very much operational.
Okay,
In fact,
so-
engine one is in better shape than engine two. Even
Okay.
though it's older.
So why is that not the front line?
The reason why that's not the frontline piece is that also has limitations. That one, you lose a couple departments on it. I could switch it. It's not going to change the overall operation of the department if I switch 1 and 2. It's not going to change it. But the other thing is, we just ran into this. We just put $50,000 into this piece for what normally would have been $6,000 worth of repairs because the parts aren't available.
Okay, but it is repaired right now.
It is. It's in
So
full
what you're
service
saying
right
is it has a little less storage space.
now. It has less storage space.
Are there alternatives, since you have a number of other pieces of equipment, to transporting that additional equipment that you can't seem to fit on engine one or the tanker pumper?
So what would end up happening is, yes, we would have to either allocate it to something else, either put it on a trailer, put it in the back of a utility vehicle, depending on the seasonal use. Because right now, the utility vehicle, which is the one that tows the boat, is geared more towards whatever rescue operations that are related to water at the time. So in the wintertime, it's geared towards ice rescue. In the spring and summertime, it's geared towards straight water rescue, towing the boat, et cetera.
Bill?
I'm looking at this inspection report.
Yeah,
of
that's for the
engine
frame of
two,
engine two. Yes, correct.
And it's recommending descale, repaint,
Yep.
et cetera. What's that, what would that cost, and would that extend the useful life?
That is $40,000 to $50,000, and it's not because of the cost of the paint. It's because I asked the mechanic about it, and it would be approximately 200 man hours worth of work to do that. Because of all the small subframe components, body mounts, et cetera, you're looking at about 200 hours of man labor at over $100 an hour.
Can I ask a sort of a kind of a follow-up question?
Sure.
What about if we hired an assistant or deputy chief? What difference would that make in terms of, I mean, it's going to be cheaper than $960,000, I hope.
You're touching on something that I was thinking about. For example, is it possible to supplement what we do now with additional personnel, for example?
Well,
An assistant.
employed person.
I understand, employed.
Not
personnel.
volunteer.
No, I'm with you. And
The only reason that I didn't come forward this year asking for a full-time employee to assist during impact hours, which would be the hours of the day where we're at the least amount of available volunteers, was because I knew that this capital expenditure was going to be, when I got the price, I actually called them back and said, this isn't the right price, correct? No. This can't be the right price. I didn't order or spec out the top of the line piece. I spec'd out a standard replacement of what I had on the floor. And that's what I got. So I did not come forward looking for a full-time employee at this point in time.
Michael?
Yeah, so a year ago, we went out, it was 680,000 for a pumper engine.
Right, now it's
And
900.
because of the way just things are, it's
Right.
a 30 per, you're looking at a 40% increase in costs across the board for stuff. That's pushed that cost up. Second, I think that, Steve, me and Chief have had these discussions, and we're gonna have discussions with neighboring towns. We have to look at how a response during the day happens and whether it can be just sustained by one town or does it have to be a multi-town approach. Over the next year, our plan is to approach other towns around us with how that can work, how it can be blended together to bring back to you guys. Now, there is one concern that we have to address, which is engine 5. What are we going to use engine 5 for over the next 20? It was purchased in 2018.
Correct.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, you've stated, it hasn't been used much.
No, it has not. So it has only been used as a means of, primarily as a means of transporting water over the road from point A to point B. It's being used as its tanker capabilities, not as its pumper capabilities, because it's more equipped the way we have it set up to service our needs in the non-water district of town, meaning the non-hydrant portions of town. Usually Beechwood, Lake Drive, parts of Interlake and Road, with the exception of Cropalo, because they do have hydrants, Hawthorne Street.
Chief, now, just so everybody is aware, NFPA standards say that does qualify as a primary response.
So in order to be labeled as a pumper, it has to meet minimum NFPA requirements. So when you dual purpose a vehicle, you have minimum requirements you have to meet for both sides of it. So when you combine two uses, you have to meet minimum requirements per the NFPA to get a compliant piece, especially if you were to fund it on a grant or anything else. Certain compliances are required when you spec these pieces out. They won't just build you something because you want it. It has to meet NFPA specifications of one kind or another. So it does, by the bare minimum, meet NFPA specifications to be used as a pumper or a tanker or both.
I think at this juncture, okay, I think it would make sense that you and Chief need to have further discussion. We need to solidify some of the details, and you need to come back to us. I think it's a
If you don't mind, can you put into writing exactly what you're looking for in terms of what you don't believe has been clarified, so I have a.
No.
basis to go for?
But there are a lot of different issues here. You know, in order to make a decision, Chief, you have to have the issues in front of you. You can't pick and choose. They're all over the place. And I think really that's an administrative management issue to put those into a formal,
I'll work with Chief to get a
a
response.
formal RFP, if you will.
Yeah.
That's where I'm coming from. So I would leave it there for the moment, and we will have subsequent discussions. We need to have further discussions. Anybody have any questions on that? Concerns? Because it's a little premature right now we're not in a position right now, based on this discussion, to make a decision. We need to solidify some more things. Okay? Anything else for Chief at this point? I would like to just make one administrative reminder for the Finance Committee that there is an audit meeting on March 23rd at 1 p.m. with our auditors, Adelson and Company. That's a Wednesday next week. It will be in this room. And is there any other business to come before this committee?
Did you want the capital?
I'm sorry? Do you want to talk
I
some
think we had
capital?
capital on there. just
Okay,
as
you go ahead. All right, capital equipment.
So just to lay out, I will be sending around updated sheets.
Get that sheet I gave you.
Because I want the committees to be aware, there's a couple items that have come in a little late. Two of them were from Park and Rec Committee. One is they're asking for money for the beach roof, 25,000. And then a.
For what roof? Sorry, what? Unimpressive.
The beach hut roof.
Yeah,
There's
The old restaurant.
the shed at the beach, so it needs to have a replacement roof, and then the beach shoreline improvement, 5,700.
What was that, the beach?
Beach,
The beach hut roof needs to be replaced.
And Michael, why,
Yeah,
Didn't we do that not too long ago?
no, it was never done.
there was that 52,000
Did a lot of
that,
work in that building.
That's the beach improvements for the parking lot.
okay, and what about the 18,000 from SBA? Can that go toward that?
yeah, but not, we can do that
Yes,
after the next
and we're
week's
looking at a
meeting.
couple things.
After the meeting.
Oh, after next one, okay.
That'd be a
that's fine.
better time to do it.
There are a couple
got too much going on.
items there, but the request has come.
I do want to
forward.
talk to you.
Yeah.
In addition, Park and Rec is asking for consideration of a full-time position for Park and Rec year-round. That part of the operational budget. I will send further information to everybody to examine their request at this time.
You mentioned a 5,700.
For a beach shoreline improvement. I will send you the information.
Wasn't the CPC request?
That's to do they want to do the beach itself.
Yeah.
the
Oh, this
sand
is separate,
and-
okay.
yeah, It is separate.
Last time we went to do that, the conservation stopped us.
Yeah, but we think with the
Kind of works it out.
road work and everything else.
Random talk to conservation committee.
So one of the big questions that we have remaining is what to also do as far as.
Go ahead.
You,
We don't need to start conversation. Okay, sorry about that.
you're mean.
I apologize.
So one of the things that we need to be talking about is where to go with our debt schedule, where to go with how we're going to fund. And Patrick, you correctly brought up about how we basically use our reserves and rest.
Well, so we get everything we need that we think we want to go ahead with, and then decide how to finance it?
Well,
Would that be the way to go?
You can look at it a couple different ways. We have options right now of funding from free cash, from stabilization. You set aside $1 million for COVID. It wasn't needed. It's now in there. So our reserves have significantly grown. But there is this other underlying thing that just is happening now is because of what's happening with interest rates. As Patrick brought up, we know that there's multiple of millions of dollars in projects that are going to be coming forward in the next year, from bridges to schools to everything. So the question becomes, do you hang on to reserves? Do you use reserves? Do you borrow right now while we're still facing somewhere in the 3% range, which if you listen to the Fed today at these 0.25%, possibly 6 in the next year, is going to significantly change. So it really brings up a lot of questions.
Steve and I both said, and I was really just echoing you, we don't want to be the bank for the taxpayers, but in this instance, there's tremendous long-term savings if you're basically paying off something with low rate so that you can borrow at a high rate next year. It makes absolutely no sense.
Question, this is finance, I don't know much about. So we vote on this stuff in May and how to pay for it.
No. We'll have to determine.
No, I'm saying, say like
town meeting.
At a town
Say
meeting,
like we
yeah.
voted on May that we're gonna buy a piece of tobacco for 50,000, we're gonna finance it. Is that interest rate locked in there, or interest rate comes on the July 1st or the ordering date?
We can go out, get all the paperwork done and get the borrowing lined up in place right away once the authorization.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that we didn't say,
So we'll
okay,
be
we're gonna
moving as
borrow at
quickly as
3%.
possible
Then
to
get the
lock in
piece
the
and it's
borrowing.
6% and then.
No, they'll
we
go
can't
out on the
afford it.
bond sale. We have to,
Okay.
there's a whole bunch of steps that have to be done after May.
I don't know what I
May
just
through
wanted to-
June, that month, we do the run up, we figure out the terms, the rest, you get the S&P that takes a quick look at the bond gets it issued out, and then people bid on it.
There's
So
nothing worse.
We
the whole thing would happen.
We have the
and
finance
pulled off
committee.
by July 1st.
We have to see a finalized capital program, and we have to make a recommendation to the select board. We're not at that point.
No, we're not.
I know we're not,
I just
but-
wanted to make sure that the interest rate.
We also have, just between the fire trucks and the highway equipment, somewhere between $1 million and $1.5 million. And one of the things we could do is we could have a special town meeting right now and authorize those things so we can go out and borrow right now. It might save a point or two on the rates and it's real money.
And why would we sit on $1 million?
Because if we could borrow now at 2% or 2.5%.
That's taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
We borrow now at 2.5%, and then we borrow for the bridge and it's at 7%. You're talking about over that 20 years, 4.5 points of interest you're going to pay so that you paid something off for a few months. I agree with you generally.
That assumes that you live with the deal that is struck when you issue the bonds. Bonds can be prepaid. If rates fall, you can prepay bonds.
Right.
No, but right now we can get money cheaper than we're going to be able to get it in 6 or 8
It
months.
bothers me to have $1 million in the bank of the taxpayers' money and not use it.
And I'm going to present the fact that we have two different issues right now, which is we have our free cash list, which I'll present the free cash list. But then we have the question of borrowing, the fact that right now we're going to see a drop off coming in 2027. And I've discussed whether or not we use some of the money, Bill, like last time I mentioned about paying down our debt.
Yeah.
If the school comes forward, so we cushion that lift.
That's another legitimate use.
That's another legitimate use, because as you can see, we're going
That's
to
a
see a
big one.
significant drop in 2027. The projects outside of free cash that I'm looking at is Tuckerman Bridge construction, 1.75 million, 330,000 for oversight and engineering. Construction and engineering on the Averitt Road Bridge of 1.2 million, a salt shed of construction and engineering at 400,000, and a pump station. We went out to bid on the pump station. We hope we're going to get a return back on the pump station that they can come down. The estimate was at 760,000. It came in at 1.19 million. So as a low bid.
North of 4 million.
Prices are a little out of control right now. So you got this delicate balancing game, and none of us, well, maybe some of you guys would be on Wall Street doing this, but if we knew the answers, we really don't know the answers of where things are going.
So we didn't mention Curtis Mill Bridge, correct? That's not.
The only one I don't know of, I don't have enough
No, I'm saying,
information is the Curtis
and.
Mill.
Okay, I think basically, we've got some more work to do.
Got a lot of work to
And we
do.
need a lot of work, correct. And from my perspective, I speak for a member of the finance committee. I'm not prepared to jump into anything and buy anything or borrow money until we know what we're doing.
I'm gonna send this around though.
We need a clear
What
budget
I'm
before you decide
what I'm
what's
showing up
going
on
on.
the board right now is what would happen if interest rates were to accelerate if we were to borrow 4 million and we could get about 2%, we're looking at a 244,000 annual payment.
Sure.
At 4%, it's 294,000. If it gets to 8%, it jumps to 407,000.
Well, 8%,
So
we
this
stop
is
doing
that,
things.
8% is your break-even number on borrowings of 20 years. You pay back the same amount in principal, in interest as the principal originally was. So that's where the comparison is. I think that no matter what, we're looking, if we want to address those capital ones, we're going to have to do some type of borrowing. Now, we could borrow for 3 million and go after grants, loans, small bridge and others. But what if we don't get them? Are we setting ourselves in a position where now we end up with another bridge closed or something like that? Those are the real questions we have to answer. And then, of course, we have highway, fire, the rest, all those capital projects that need to come out of the free cash. I do think those need to come out of free. We have to be using some of that free cash, that stabilization, and a combination of borrowing to get everything done. So what I will do is, instead of going through any type of long presentation, what I do is I'm updating everything. I will try to have everything out by early next week, plus showing the borrowings and the rest. I did get some direct numbers from Unibank on what a borrowing would be right now at 3 million and 4 million. And then I have just a generic calculator that gives us a rough estimate. But just looking at some of those, so we make some of those decisions soon as to what we're looking at, and then how do we fund all these projects? Because, yeah, we have a lot of, somebody said it, I think, Jim, the can is sort of exploded and it's all over the place. And now how are we going to go about picking
We're
up?
looking at $25 million in aggregate. It's.
Yeah, I wonder, Mike, would it be possible, I know that you're in the process of preparing an investment policy. At least according to our auditors.
Yeah.
And, but I think related to that is the question that's brought up here, and that's also a reserve policy. We've had an informal agreement, informal at best, about what our reserve requirements should be.
We still maintain that. We're maintaining.
Well, I think having a formally voted and reserve policy, it doesn't mean that it's a noose around your neck and you can't change it. Call it targets, whatever you will. But I think that ought to be part of our sort of financial picture as well. So that when we go to use stabilization and free cash and things like that, we have a bottom target that we're always shooting at.
Stabilization percentage. Okay.
I believe over 10.
Go ahead, Jim.
Michael, I have, you're going to send out an update from what I heard you say, correct? I print some of those so I can digest it.
Yeah.
Some of the colors that you use when you print, you cannot read.
I actually corrected that one and made where it's purple, the white ink. So I understand.
Those are the ones.
I got a magnifying.
Those are the ones you want to sneak by, yes.
So here's a little bit of just an interesting, the last page that you're going to get that has all of our reserves right now. If stabilization, and say we set aside to pay down the loan, which we talked about for the school, and say we started putting some money into a dedicated stabilization for a future purchase of an engine. And just to let you know, we are still in the running for an AFG grant for our fire engine. We still, even if we do this and you come down and you look at all the different reserves we have, we're in really solid shape. And that stabilization account balances and free cash balances assumes we're funding everything. And we're still going to have over $3 million in the bank from all the different accounts. If you just look at stabilization and free cash, we'll still, if we fund everything, be sitting at 17.54% of our budget in reserve. And if you count the money that's sitting, if we set it aside, dedicated to pay off those things, it actually can go all the way up to 29%. So even if we fund everything, we're still in. The only thing that doesn't bring into funding is those bigger projects like the Tuckerman Bridge and the other.
Imagine if the federal budget was like this. With this kind of percentage of reserves, it's like la la land.
I'd like to call
They
for an
print them.
adjournment. We've got a lot more to do, all right?
Motion to,
Second, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.